Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the third installment of AgTech Tuesday. Today, we're going to focus on technology to improve on-farm efficiency. We've got a great lineup of speakers, and we're really excited to introduce and get started. But to start off with, let's go over a little bit of housekeeping. Today's session is going to be recorded. You'll receive an email with the recording link and a short survey to complete. You'll also be able to find that recording at our YouTube channel. So if you want to check out this upcoming recording or some of the past recordings from other events, you should go ahead and subscribe. So as the webinar goes on, feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A chat feature. You can find that at the bottom of your screen. We will hold questions until the end and answer them at that time with a panel of our speakers today. Feel free to also utilize the chat feature to interact with other attendees and with the speakers throughout the event. There will be some poll questions that pop up as well to gather your feedback throughout the presentations. So let's practice that chat feature right now. So first, find the chat at the bottom of the screen and open it up, and then switch it to chat to all panelists and attendees. And then answer the question, what technologies are you currently using on your farm that you feel helps improve your efficiency? And we'll give you a few minutes to put some responses there. So while you're entering your responses in the chat, let's go over our ag tech tip of the week. You should consider making a list of all of the precision ag technologies that you have available on your farm, and then take that one step further and make a list of all of the different types of data that you're generating using those technologies. This could be really handy when you're trying to make decisions on the farm. You can check this list and see what information you have available that can help you with that decision making. So as we get ready to kick off today, hopefully by now you've gotten a copy of the 2020 eFields report. If not, you can download a copy from the link there to follow along today. And if you would like a printed copy, go ahead and reach out to us at digitalag@osu.edu and send us your address, and we'll get a copy to you in the mail. You can also visit your local extension office if you would like to pick up a copy. To start off with today, I'd like to first introduce Alysa Gauci. She is a master's student here with the Digital Ag team at Ohio State University, and she's going to be talking about a really exciting research project where she's looking at yield data and how we can use it for decision making and what we need to keep in mind when we're using it for decision making on the farm. So I'll hand off to you, Alysa.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for logging on. My name is Alysa Gauci, and I'm a graduate research associate at Ohio State. And today we'll be diving into utilizing yield monitor data for on-farm research trials. So to begin with, we all know the endless possibilities there are with on-farm research. On previous AgTech Tuesday webinars and throughout the eFields book, we see seeding rate trials, fertilizer rate trials, nutrient management, you pretty much name it. Although there is a lot of diversity among these studies, one commonality between them is utilizing yield data, especially from yield monitors. As we know, yield monitors are one of the most used technologies in precision agriculture and in on-farm research. However, aside from calibration, there is really limited information on setting up on-farm studies that use this data as a response variable. And when it comes to proper experimental design, should blocks, strips, or even individual yield points be used? Are the assumptions and conclusions we're making based off of the yield data accurate to what's truly happening out in the field? As you can see, there are several questions regarding this topic, but overall, one of the most important ones, and also what this project aims to answer, is what scale can yield monitor data be used to support on-farm research? So like I mentioned, this project aims to test some of these questions and ultimately create some best management practices too. To do this, we had a 15-acre field out at the Western Agriculture Research Station in South Charleston to test some different plot lengths. We looked at 7 different lengths that range from one of the smallest plot sizes that's been used at 12.5 feet, all the way up to 800 foot that was selected to simulate the natural variability within the field, and to create intentional high and low yield differences that could be measured. The plots alternated with 0 and then 180 pounds of nitrogen per acre applied. So I know this looks a little overwhelming, but stay with me. This is what the original plot plan looked like, with high yield areas hoping to be in green where we applied nitrogen, and then the exact opposite for gray, so no nitrogen applied there. And luckily, this was transcribed pretty well, as you can see from this mid-season aerial shot that we got. Moving on, data collection was conducted with the field combine as well as a plot combine. We had 12 rows per pass. 8 of those rows was harvested by the field combine. The adjacent 2 was harvested by the plot combine. And then there was a buffer on either side of each treatment. The field combine was equipped with an 8-row corn head and 2 commercial yield monitors, and it ran the entire 1,000 feet at a constant 5 miles per hour. The plot combine also ran the entire 1,000 feet, but it did stop every 25 feet to collect an estimated weight. And for the smallest treatment, we did have to stop the plot combine every 12.5 foot to get data for those plots. And this was done with hopes to have an accurate yield estimate of each plot that could ultimately be compared back to what the yield monitors would report. Then we also measured the weight of each pass with the weigh wagon for those accumulated weights. So some results based off those accumulated weights from the yield monitors. This is plotted against what the weigh wagon recorded. This can be seen here. This is looking solely at the accumulated weights, not taking into consideration any of the treatments or any of those high or low yielding zones. This is simply an average per pass. As you can see, both yield monitors have nearly a 1-to-1 relationship when compared to what the weigh wagon reported. This was the first step in making some comparisons, but most importantly, it showed us that the accumulated amounts per pass can be accurate. But what about that point-to-point variation or even variation across the field? This was the next step, to dive a little bit deeper and consider some of these different treatment links. And that's what's shown here. Here we have the yield data for one of the 50-foot passes from the plot combine and from the case yield monitor. Notice how at the smaller treatment, the data doesn't really overlay too well. It's a little bit shifted. The yield monitor is picking up changes in yield, but not necessarily reporting similar yields to that of the plot combine. Like I mentioned, that's due to some of those shifts. And it is also important to note here that there's a little bit of overestimation from that yield monitor too. But as we increase those links, we did see the yield monitor data fit the yield estimates from the plot combine a little bit better. And an example of that can be seen here. This is one of the passes for the 200-foot treatments, and compared to the 50-foot plot we saw in the previous slide, the yield monitor picks up these yield differences going from a high yield zone to a low yield zone, and also estimates that yield a little bit more closely to what the plot combine reported. And these trends can be really seen on this next slide. So here, we're looking at the normalized yield for each treatment length for the plot combine and for the case yield monitor for each of the high and low yielding zones. Theoretically, we would want that light green area that represents the plot combine data for the low yield zones to match the dark green that represents the yield monitor data. We want that data to match up almost exactly, if not very closely. And then the same goes for the gray areas that represent the high yield zones for each. However, at about 12.5 foot and even 25 foot, there is virtually no difference reported from the yield monitor. It's estimating that the high and low yield zones are the same, which we know that's not correct. As we saw in the previous slides, those differences are picked up around 50 foot, but not really representing what the yield is at that point, or at those different points. It's not until after 100 feet that the data starts to match in terms of recognizing high and low yield zones, and also reporting these estimates similar to what we saw with the plot combine data. And so this was looking just at the case data. There was another yield monitor used in the study. And so here we see a very similar pattern with the precision planting yield monitor, that at 12.5 and 25 feet, the yield differences are not detected by the yield monitor. And even here, we also see some differences start to be recorded at 50 foot, but it's not until the much larger distances where the yield monitor data begins to closely match what we saw from the plot combine data. So I know that was a lot of information thrown at you in a pretty short time, but just to wrap up with a couple last points. It's important to note that if you already are, or if you're considering conducting on-farm research, you can see that it is critical to have enough length and a sufficient amount of yield points to be able to use that data that you're getting and ultimately have an accurate representation of what's going on in the field. Without that, you begin to question the effects of the treatments applied and the conclusions you're able to draw. It's also important to mention that this project is ongoing, and there are still several more steps in data analysis that needs to be conducted. But very preliminary, it's looking like this minimum length we've been talking about is going to be around that 200 to 400 foot range. And at the end of the project, the goal is to have a minimum length to recommend for conducting on-farm research trials. And looking forward, this study is going to be replicated in 2021, again using corn. We'll also be looking at the effects of varying combine speed and looking at those results. As mentioned previously, all this data was captured by running a consistent 5 miles per hour. So it'll be really interesting to see how varying ground speed will impact those results. And overall, just really excited to be able to begin another year of data analysis, data collection, research. And so that's all I had for today. Thank you for your time. Here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out with any questions or any feedback. I'm more than happy to discuss this project in more depth. Thank you.
Thanks, Alyssa. This is some really incredible information that I'm looking forward to seeing over the next few years, the data that you're collecting and analyzing so that we can better inform how to use yield data on our farms. So next up, we've got Chris Shoup. He's also a master's student in the Digital Ag program, and he's doing some really interesting things looking at monitoring manure on the go. So I'll hand it off to you, Chris.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Shoup, and I am a master's student here at the Ohio State University. I'm studying precision agriculture in FABE under Dr. John Fulton, and I'm doing a project on manure nutrient management. So I'm going to share today about my project and kind of what we did. So my project is, how we can best optimize and utilize the new technologies on the market into manure or liquid manure application. So currently, without any of these sensors, you either tank or dragline apply your manure. You have a rate that is predetermined based on a pit sample, a 500 milliliter pit sample, maybe what your crops are using and some soil sampling you did. And then after you're done, you have an empty pit, but you also have an estimated coverage map of, we applied 5,000 gallons an acre. Something like that is usually what people are having. And in this picture, you can see kind of some of the research we did. I'm going to follow up and show you a video, and I'll talk on a little bit more. So I just want to show and share kind of what we're doing here is you have an inline sensor directly on that toolbar right before the distribution manifold. On top of the tractor, you see the globe. That's an RTK globe that's able to keep us between the rows. And this is actually a partnered project where Glenn Arnold is side dressing corn, and we partner with his project to do this application and utilize the sensor in this area. And then you can also see that the toolbar is outfitted with some sampling ports. So samples were taken every 20 minutes for lab analysis to compare to what the sensors read, not for accuracy, just to see kind of if there's a bias one way that we can calibrate for. These sensors are still being calibrated to our systems and things like that. We're just trying to help our industry partner and kind of just give them feedback and things like that. So we're not trying to validate, that they work or not. So I'm going to move on. I really want to share what we found out. And I think we're going to start here with, what the samples that we took concurrent with sampling or with the application provided us. So there is something to keep in mind here that pit 1 and 2 were agitated. Pit 3 and 4 were not. You can see the difference in what agitation did. The consistency in pit 2 is evident. There's still a change, but it is much more consistent than that of 3 and 4 that were not agitated. And you can really see that in the P205. I think that's pretty cool, how agitation can mitigate some of this variation. But there is challenges with agitation, and I acknowledge that, and I understand them. So, and then I just want to move on, kind of keep this short, but I want to show what the sensor was able to provide. not only after the fact, the maps and stuff, but the operator feedback in the cab, I think is really cool. You can see, you're getting your flow rate, and then it's estimating your constituents down there in the bottom box. And you actually have like an applied nutrient coverage map. This is all very similar. It's a screen similar to that of harvesting or planting. That I think that's just pretty cool. It's on par with those things that we're used to. But then you also have this target rate limiting factor, and then this tractor implement automation, if compatible. Those three are pretty cool because it tells the operator that he can speed up and slow down to achieve his target rate and still meet his limiting factor. So I just think that that's a cool opportunity. Having some feedback right there in front of you. It's tracking your flow rate. You're seeing all those things, all those numbers. You're seeing if you're having spikes or something like that in the cab. So not only is that cool, but I want to show you some of the maps that it generated as well. So, this sensor, this was just 2 days that we did this at one site. We pumped 1.2 million gallons of manure, and the sensor took 50,450 measurements. Every 20 minutes, I only took 25 samples at this site. And you can see how much different, the variation is compared to what my samples said. So this is, if you look at the phosphorus map in that top portion, the second day, that is where that pit 1 came from. So I think that's pretty cool. You can see kind of the variation. I'm going to change my pointer here to being something you guys can see. So here on phosphorus, this is where we started into the field. So you can see how it's heavier at this portion, and then you work your way this way, and then you always do your loop. So the hose came this way. So then you come across, drag, so that you're able to manage your hose. And then you start across the field here, and then they relined their hose here, and then they did this half, and then they finished down this corner. So you can see how you started with more phosphorus here and ended with more phosphorus here. And it is consistent in this field, in this field. So I just think that that's pretty cool that you can see those, you can see where you started and where you finished. You can see, those changes. You can also see that this field and this field all came out of the same pit. And then this field, and this field. So these three are all out of the same pit. And it's interesting because this is steer manure, actually. They have a slatted floor steer barn there where these two fields were taken out of, and you can see the difference in phosphorus. But then, it is still pretty good in nitrogen. I think that's pretty cool. I'm going to close up here. I want to keep it short and sweet. I just think that these are some pretty cool maps. Just want to share kind of what we're seeing. Very preliminary results. We only have a small data set right now, but this is some pretty cool information to use just to show what these sensors can do. So, I just want to reiterate that, we see stratification of the pit nutrients. There's valuable operator feedback, and your phosphorus and your nitrogen concentrations do change during application, as was shown in those last maps. So again, I'm Chris. Feel free to email me if we don't get your questions answered here in the Q&A to follow these presentations. I really appreciate you guys listening. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. This was some really cool information, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this technology changes the way we make manure applications in the future. Next up, we've got Andrew Klopfenstein, also a member of the digital ag team here at Ohio State, and he's going to go over some of the results we've been seeing over the past few years, looking at high-speed planting in corn.
Good morning. My name is Andrew Klopfenstein. I am a research engineer with the Department of Food, Agriculture, and Biological Engineering, and I'm going to talk today about our eFields study with high-speed corn planting for 2020. We've been doing this study since 2016. When we first started out looking at this study, we were trying to find out what the power and speed limitations were with respect to emergence in corn yield. Over the last 5 years, we've been really impressed with the results that we have received. And we're going to talk a little bit further about those today. So the study design for 2020, we had a Case IH 500 Steiger road track in conjunction with a Case IH 2150 24 row 30-inch early riser planter. This is the first year that we've had a 60-foot planter, so we were excited to see what the capacity was of this outfit. The planter was equipped with Precision Planning's complete suite of tools. We had clean sweep, V-set, V-drive, speed tube, delta force, and we were monitoring all this and controlling it with a Gen 3 2020 monitor. On the Case IH side, we were equipped with wing downforce to keep the planter level, the toolbar level, and spread out the weight throughout the field. And we had the 2-stage closing system on the rear that is a set point from the cab. We also equipped this planter with a set of SUSI tracks to help with flotation and pinch row compaction throughout all our studies in 2020. We used our OSU Plots app to lay out our complete randomized block design for execution during the planting stage. So this field was in South Central Ohio, just outside of South Bloomfield, Ohio, off US 23 in a river bottom. We have been in this field with high-speed studies on a steady rotation since 2016. This was the site for our first study, and we continue to use this field for some of our high-speed plots. So when we look at this field, it is relatively flat. We typically plant, if we look at my cursor here, we typically plant just outside of where this roadway is going towards the east. We have roughly 5 to 6 feet of rise and fall, but we're overall very, very flat. And we do have a waterway, a natural waterway that runs through this field. And that can be seen here with the elevation. When we look at the soils in this field, we're overall very consistent. And although this is a US Surgo soil map, we're actually going to look at some smart farmer data to help us better understand what that field looks like. So this is our range of organic matter throughout the field. This field has been no-till since the lifetime of the field that we've been running in it. We would do some light vertical tillage to prepare the field, but no heavy tillage. This is river bottom. You can see the river as it runs around the field. And we're seeing ranges of organic matter from 2 to 3.5% consistently year to year. As this is being a no-till field, we do see all our traffic events. So we are very aware of some of our previous events and how the field is treated with respect to harvest. We do have some, as you can see, there are some standard paths that are used for grain cart and traffic throughout the growing season. This field, when it is sprayed perpendicular to planting. So that is, if you can see this sprayer tracks, we would be planting north and south and spraying more on an east and west pattern. So when we look at planter performance, we were very, very pleased with what we were able to accomplish. As you can see here, this is our singulation map for 2020. You cannot pull out any of the treatments from our speed. So our operating speeds were 5, 7.5, 10, and 12.5 miles per hour. And if we would see differences in that, that would be indicated by the legend below. But as we can see, very consistent overall planting. So I always like to show a couple videos here, just so we know what is going on with the row unit. This is a video that we've had in the past, but very, very similar conditions. This year that we had a little bit better seed bed prep. So this is a very cloddy soil, but overall, this is the right of the row unit at 5 miles an hour. So we look at the range of motion. We have a very good control of the range of motion, and that is due to our hydraulic delta force and our down force. So we keep that right consistent, and we maintain overall seed depth. So when we start talking about increasing speed, I'd like to show in the next video. And this is a video of high speed planting when we are greater than speeds of 12.5 miles an hour. What I want you to notice is the peak to peak oscillations or movement of the row unit. The row unit continues to ride in that same motion. All we are doing is changing that frequency, so it's faster. We do a really good job of maintaining seed depth, and that is all to deal with that hydraulic downforce. When we look at overall field observations and understanding planting capacity, we have theoretical planting capacity and we have what is adjusted field capacity. And when we look at that adjusted field capacity, that's all going to depend on a farmer's operation. And that depends on how the field is laid out. If it is more of a square field, rolling field, if you have lots of waterways, or if you have a lot of downtime because you're putting on a lot of liquid products. So if you are putting on in furrow or starter, obviously those rates are going to depend how quickly you have to fill the planter. So when we look at those, we tend to estimate this is for a 40-foot planter, roughly 19 acres per hour at 5 mile an hour. When we start looking at 10 miles an hour, we're roughly looking at 38 acres an hour. Now, not always is this a direct correlation where we would double our capacity, as when we double our capacity, we also have to take into account filling that planter more frequently and having enough bandwidth to bring that fertilizer and that seed to the planter. So field observations for 2020, the stand counts, as we will show those results here in a few slides, show little difference between speeds, but the highest stand count area did result in the highest yield. Uniform emergence allowed the crop to get off a good start, thanks to hydraulic downforce keeping the planting depth consistent. We did have a wet spring, but we turned into a very dry summer. Growing conditions were favorable, but the yield limiting factor in the field was planting date as well as lack of moisture. But we had very little disease from 2020. When we look at that throughout the growing season, this is the weather map. We did plant this in the first week of June. So from June to when we harvested in November, we had very little rain. We had single digits amount of rain, but yet we did have a decent yield. So results for 2020, when we look at that emergence, we go from roughly 25,396 or 24,000 all the way up to 25,542. So very, very tight range on yield, or on emergence, excuse me. And then when we look at yield, we did not have any significant difference from 5 to 12. And if we look at that, our highest yielding, which was at 192, did have the most plants emerge from planting. So when we talk about conclusions for 2020 and over the last few years, we continue to see no significant difference from different speeds and limitations on yield. 3 necessary components to make this happen, and we have to really have hydraulic downforce and electric drive meters, and well as speed tubes or some sort of high speed seed delivery. We have to make sure we set our hydraulic downforce correctly for the speeds that we are traveling. And as we continue to look at this in several different locations, we see an advantage of planting faster, but this is always going to depend on a grower and field by field basis. We are not advocating for planting all fields at 12.5 miles an hour, but your speed might be able to have an increase of 30 to 40%, just depending on what the field conditions are like when you go to that field. Planting speed obviously allows to cover more acres, and as we have seen the shrinking of our weather window, we continue to see the need to get more acres planted in a short amount of time. So we want to thank Beck's Hybrids Precision Planting, Case, and Susie Track for their continued support on this project. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at my email, klopfenstein30.34, and I will be able to answer any questions. Thanks and have a great day.
Thanks, Andrew. I really love seeing this data and watching you guys go out with these trials and push the limits of technology today and seeing what we can really do. So our final speaker today is Dr. Brooke Beam. She's our extension educator down in Highland County, and she's going to share some exciting ways that we're looking at sharing information with you guys, some really cool things with virtual reality. And I'm sure that by the time she's done, you're going to be wanting to check out our YouTube channel, at least we hope.
Hi, I'm Brooke Beam, the Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Community Development Extension Educator in Highland County. And today I'd like to talk to you about some of the video projects that we've been conducting over the past year or so, and ways that you can participate and help us going forward in the future. So we're going to talk about things, what I'm coining the phrase as agriculture through the camera lens. So if you have a YouTube account, or if you're just interested in watching YouTube videos, I would encourage you to follow along on our two different channels here. The one on the left is for the OSU Precision Ag channel, and the one on the right is the channel that I manage for the Ohio State University Extension Highland County office, but in particular, the Southern Ohio Farm Show is one of our projects. So you'll see that there's different content on both channels. You're going to find a lot more of the tech components on the Precision Ag channel. And then for the Highland County page and the Southern Ohio Farm Show section, that's a weekly television style program that I produce that we cover everything that imaginable, whether it's forages, production agriculture, things with agronomy, even kind of going into some food science topics. There's a wide variety of things that we cover. If you like the U.S. Farm Report, it's made in a similar style, but tailored to producers here in Highland County, Southern Ohio, and really anybody in Ohio would be applicable to their viewership as well. So if you're interested in learning more about a variety of topics, follow the Southern Ohio Farm Show. So one of the questions that I have for you all is, what platforms do you use to learn more about agricultural content when you're online? Do you use Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube? Are there other platforms that you've been using that you find that are relevant and applicable? And then also, what are the agriculture related YouTube channels that you like to follow online? Is it for educational purposes? Do you like to follow things for entertainment? We'd like to gauge your interest to see where you are following, what you're following, and where you think the viewership should be watching. So over the past year, we've partnered on a variety of different projects. So I've been involved in over 100 different video projects that have been posted online, and they cover a really broad spectrum of agricultural topics. So here's just a selection of the videos that you can see on our online channels. And in particular, there's some really interesting things we've been doing with virtual reality and immersive experiences. So what is virtual reality? That's always a question that we get by a lot of folks. And virtual reality is really, it's from how we're using it. It's the recording of a real life setting with the 360-degree camera. So a 360-degree camera is like the video you're seeing here. It's also just like this camera that I have in my hand. And what's interesting about it is that there's a lens on either side of the camera. So it's capturing this full 360-degree view of whatever it's seeing. Now, there's a lot of different variations of this. It can be as basic as a 360-degree view. If you wanted to get in something really super advanced, a lot of gaming opportunities are out there for that's an extreme version of this immersive content. But for what the things that we're making and how we're using it, we're really just capturing a simplistic 360-degree view of what's going on. We do incorporate a little bit of computer generated graphics, but mostly it's in the form of text to help explain what's being viewed. And this is an emerging trend that we're seeing across a lot of different platforms and a lot of different educational components. The more people they're able to see everything, it's a more educational way to connect with our viewers. So how have we used this in our educations? And where are we going in the future? So many of you, I'm sure, have attended the Farm Science Review, and what we've typically seen at Farm Science Review is the image on the top, where there's a lot of people there, and you're able to talk to other folks. But due to the pandemic, what we saw this past fall was the picture on the bottom, and it was empty. So this prompted us to go online, and we've created a series of different demonstrations. So if you wanted to see something up close on these different pieces of equipment, we had these cameras mounted all over them. So you can see different parts of the tractors. You can ride along in the cab. You want to see something more up close on the implement that it's pulling. There's a variety of different views that you can see. So this also allows us to get an up close look on performance so that you're able to see things in greater detail than you would in person. It's not safe to sit on the back of some of these pieces of equipment or to ride on top of the auger, but you can mount a camera on there and get to see a really interesting view. So if you haven't seen some of those videos, I would encourage you to watch those. And then also another opportunity that we had with this technology was a 360 tour of the ag crop plots. And so there were over 10,000 views of this immersive tour of the plots. So there's a different way to reach individuals by this digital content. And we've also found that our geographic footprint is much larger by utilizing these online trends. So even though these 360 experiences are they give you a full surrounding view, you're able to utilize this content and make it into a flat screen video, whether or not you, if you want to make it a little bit more of a versatile tool, particularly if you're wanting to make your own videos, these cameras offer a lot of flexibility. So this is one example of a flat screen video that we've made with all 360-degree cameras, but we've repurposed that so that it fits onto a regular flat screen view. So there's a lot of opportunities to partner with you. If you have an interest in video production and you'd like to partner with us for eFields research or other on-farm activities, please reach out to us. We'd love to partner with other farmers in Ohio and to make more interesting and engaging projects that other farmers can learn and benefit from. So here's my contact information. Again, if you'd like to follow any of our YouTube channels, you're welcome to scan the QR codes. We'll also have the links in the chat. If you have any questions, please reach out, and we look forward to seeing you in person here in the future.
Thanks, Brooke. It's always great to see these really innovative ways that you're looking at sharing results. And hopefully everyone on the line today is going to check out the different social medias, check out our YouTube page and some of the cool things that you've shared today. So I'd like to thank all of our speakers one final time. A lot of great information that they've all shared with us today, and we really appreciate the time they've taken to join us.